Somewhere along the Costa del Sol, one of the most visited holiday destinations on Earth, a 15-year-old Irish girl walked out of her friend's house on New Year's Day, 2008. She never arrived home. Her name was Amy Fitzpatrick, and almost nobody heard about it. To understand what happened to Amy Fitzpatrick, you first have to understand the world she was living in, because it was a world that, by any reasonable measure, a 15-year-old girl should never have been placed in. Amy was born in Ireland. She was an ordinary teenager in the truest sense of the word. She loved her friends. She was funny and warm and fiercely loyal to the people she cared about. By all accounts, she was the kind of person who made a room feel different when she walked into it. Brighter, somehow. More alive. But Amy's home life told a very different story. Her mother, Audrey Fitzpatrick, was in a relationship with a man named David Mahon. And it was because of David Mahon's real estate business on the Costa del Sol in southern Spain, a region that had boomed throughout the mid-2000s with Irish and British expat investment, that Amy found herself uprooted from everything she had ever known, pulled away from her friends, away from her school, away from her father, Christopher, who was back in Ireland, and transplanted into a life on the Spanish coast that, behind its sun-soaked exterior, had become something deeply, quietly troubling. Amy was living in the Riviera del Sol area, a stretch of coastline south of Malaga, popular with expat families. On the surface, it sounds almost glamorous, the kind of place people dream about moving to. Warm weather, beautiful coast, a slower pace of life. But Amy's reality was anything but glamorous. We know this because Amy kept a diary. And in that diary, she wrote things that are very difficult to read. She wrote that she had not showered in 2 years. She wrote that she had to scavenge for food. When she could, she slept at friends' houses. When she couldn't, she reportedly slept in abandoned cars. She was 15 years old. And the adults who were supposed to care for her, who were supposed to be her home, were failing her in ways that are almost impossible to fully comprehend. But here is the thing about Amy that matters most. The thing that cuts right through everything else. She had not given up. She desperately wanted to go home. Not to the apartment on the Costa del Sol, but to Ireland. To her father, Christopher. To her real life. The one that had been taken from her. Plans were made. Amy was going to travel back to Ireland in December 2007, just weeks before she disappeared. She was going to see her dad. She was going home. She packed her suitcase. But then her mother and David Mahon canceled the trip, and Amy never unpacked her suitcase. Sit with that for a moment. A 15-year-old girl, in a situation she did not choose and could not escape, packs her bags to go home, and then has that hope taken away. And she leaves her suitcase sitting there, still packed, as if some part of her refused to accept that she wasn't leaving, as if she still believed she was going to get out. She never did. Before Amy Fitzpatrick disappeared, someone tried to raise the alarm. I want you to remember this section because it may be the most important part of this entire story, not just for understanding what happened to Amy, but for understanding how it was allowed to happen at all. Pearl Cantley was the mother of one of Amy's close friends. She had seen Amy's life up close. She had watched this teenager arrive at her home, exhausted, hungry, displaced. She had watched a child exist on the margins of her own life, and she was frightened. Not in a vague, general sense, frightened in a specific, concrete, deeply serious way. Pearl Cantley did something remarkable. She wrote a letter. She addressed that letter to the Irish Embassy in Madrid, Spain. In it, she stated that Amy feared for her life. She named David Mahon directly, stating that he posed a specific risk to Amy's safety. She was clear, she was detailed, she used her name, she put it in writing. And then she wrote something that, in the years since, has become almost unbearable to look back on. She wrote, "Amy is liable to disappear." Those words, written before Amy disappeared, submitted to an official body by a private citizen who had no particular power or platform, just a conscience and enough courage to use it. The Irish embassy in Madrid received that letter. Amy was still living in the same home, with the same man, and nothing changed. We do not know with complete certainty what actions were or were not taken in response to Pearl Cantley's warning. What we do know, with absolute, documented certainty, is the outcome. Amy Fitzpatrick vanished on New Year's Day, 2008. She was 15 years old, and she has never been found. Now, I want to be precise here, because precision matters. We are not making legal accusations beyond what courts have formally established, but the existence of that letter, a documented formal warning submitted to an official body naming a specific individual as a risk to a specific child, written before that child disappeared, is a matter of record. It cannot be explained away. It cannot be dismissed, and it has never been adequately answered. Pearl Cantley saw what was happening. She put it in writing. She used every official channel available to her, and she was right. The 1st of January, 2008, New Year's Day. Spain had rung in the new year the night before. The streets of the Costa del Sol had that particular quality they always have after a celebration. Slightly suspended, not quite awake yet. The kind of quiet that feels like the whole world is catching its breath. Amy Fitzpatrick had spent the evening at the home of her friend, Ashley Rose. This was not unusual. Amy spent time at friends' homes regularly. As we've established, it was often one of the only places where she felt comfortable, where she felt, at least for a little while, like a normal teenager. Before she left Ashley's house that evening, Amy made a phone call. She used the landline in Ashley's home. She called her mother. We do not know exactly what was said in that conversation. We do not know whether it was brief or long, warm or tense. But we know that Amy made the call. And then she left. She walked out of Ashley Rose's home, and she was never seen again. Now, here is where the detail matters. Amy had 2 mobile phones, an Irish phone, which she used specifically to store contacts, the numbers of the people in her life, and a Spanish phone, which she had told people her stepfather David Mahan had smashed. That Irish phone was precious to her, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it contained, the people she loved, the connections to her real life. It was, in a way, one of the only things she had that was truly hers. When police began investigating Amy's disappearance, they found that phone in her bedroom, at home. Now, there are 2 possible ways to interpret this. Either Amy made it home that night, at least to the point of being inside the house, inside her bedroom, and disappeared from there, or someone else placed that phone in her room after she was gone. If Amy did make it home, then what happened inside that building becomes the central, urgent question of this entire case. The phone was taken as evidence, along with Amy's laptop. These items were held by Amy's lawyer in Spain, a man referred to in case records as Juan, and kept at his office. And then, Juan's office was burgled. Nothing of monetary value was taken. No cash, no equipment, no items that any opportunistic burglar would typically go for. The only things taken from that office were Amy's phone and Amy's laptop. Only those 2 things. The only 2 pieces of technology belonging to a missing 15-year-old girl. The only items that might have contained messages, contacts, photographs, any kind of digital record of her life, her fears, her communications in the days and weeks before she vanished. Whether that burglary was connected to Amy's disappearance has never been formally established. We cannot state that as fact, but we can state the facts as they are. The timing, the specificity, the extraordinary coincidence of what was and was not taken. Amy's digital footprint, whatever it contained, is gone, and it has never been recovered. The family eventually returned to Ireland, and here is where this story becomes, if it is even possible, more heartbreaking still. Amy had a brother. His name was Dean Fitzpatrick. Those who knew them described the bond between Amy and Dean the way you'd expect siblings who have been through difficulty together to be described. Protective of each other, deeply close, loyal in a way that runs underneath everything. Amy loved Dean. Dean loved Amy. That part of the story, at least, is uncomplicated. After Amy disappeared, Dean carried that loss. He grew up carrying it. And then, around 2011, something good happened for Dean. He became a father. A young man who had spent his teenage years under the shadow of his missing sister, he had a child, a reason to look ahead, a new beginning. In 2013, Dean Fitzpatrick was 23 years old. He was a father. He had his whole life in front of him. He was stabbed by David Mahone. The same David Mahone. The man Amy's diary, Amy's friends, and a formal letter to the Irish embassy had all, in their own ways, flagged as someone dangerous. The man whose name sits at the center of this family's story like a stone dropped into still water. Every ripple, every wave, traces back to him. Dean died. He was 23 years old. He had just become a father. He was Amy Fitzpatrick's brother. David Mahone was charged. He stated that the stabbing was accidental. He was convicted of manslaughter. He served a sentence of 7 years. 7 years. And when David Mahone was released from prison, he and Audrey Fitzpatrick, Amy's mother, got married. That is not speculation. That is not rumor or hearsay or a detail sourced from somewhere unreliable. That is what happened. I'll say it one more time because I think it needs to be heard clearly. The man convicted of killing Amy's brother married Amy's mother. It is not the role of this channel to declare legal guilt beyond what courts have established. David Mahone was convicted of the manslaughter of Dean Fitzpatrick, and he served the sentence handed down to him. That is the legal record. But Amy Fitzpatrick has never been found. Her case has never been solved. And the man whose name appears repeatedly, documentably, undeniably across the most significant and devastating events of this family's story walked out of prison and married the mother of the 2 young people whose lives were destroyed. We will leave you to sit with that. Here is a question I want to ask directly. Why do you not know Amy Fitzpatrick's name? Not as a rhetorical device, as a genuine question that deserves a genuine answer. In 2007, the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann from the Algarve region of Portugal dominated global news coverage for months. That case received international attention, wall-to-wall media, and the involvement of authorities at the highest levels. It was, and continues to be, one of the most reported missing persons cases in modern history. Madeleine's case deserved serious attention. Her disappearance was a tragedy, and no reasonable person would argue otherwise. But the following year, a 15-year-old Irish girl vanished from the Costa del Sol. She had a documented welfare record, a formal warning, naming a specific individual as a threat to her safety, had been submitted to her country's own embassy before she disappeared. She had a packed suitcase in the corner of her room and a brother who would later be killed. And you had almost certainly never heard her name before today. The uncomfortable truth about missing persons cases is that attention is not distributed equally. It never has been. The socioeconomic background of a missing child matters, even when it shouldn't. The perceived sympathy of a family matters, even when it shouldn't. The circumstances of a child's home life, how tidy the story is, how easily it fits a particular narrative, these things shape which cases receive resources, which receive coverage, and which quietly disappear along with the person themselves. Amy Fitzpatrick's case, in many respects, is a study in that disparity. She was not from a wealthy family. Her home life was chaotic and difficult, through absolutely no fault of her own. She was a teenager in a loosely governed expat community in Spain, in an era when the oversight of such communities by both Spanish and Irish authorities was, at best, inconsistent. And she was failed. Not once, not by one person, but repeatedly across multiple systems, by multiple institutions, over multiple years. Pearl Cantley did the right thing. She saw a child in danger, she named the danger, she put it in writing, and she submitted it through the proper official channels. And Amy still disappeared. Her father, Christopher Fitzpatrick, has never stopped fighting for answers. Over the years, there have been renewed calls for a fresh investigation, calls for Irish and Spanish authorities to revisit the evidence, to take another look, to give this case the attention it should have received from the very beginning. Amy's case is officially still open. She is listed as a missing person. She would be 32 years old today. In recent months, there has been a new development, though not the kind anyone hoped for. Amy's mother, Audrey, has been hospitalized. She's been in a serious condition with liver failure, understood to be related to alcohol dependency. Reports indicate her condition has been critical. I want to be careful about how this is framed because it matters. Illness is illness. Suffering is suffering. And whatever Audrey Fitzpatrick's role in the events of this story, she is a human being, and her health is not something to be treated as a punchline or a form of justice. But for many people who have followed Amy's case over the years, and for Amy's father and the broader family, and the people who loved Amy and Dean, this development has brought everything flooding back. Because Audrey Fitzpatrick was there. She was in Spain. She canceled the trip home that Amy had packed her suitcase for. She was the parent. And after her daughter disappeared and her son was killed, she married the man convicted of killing him. There are people who hold hope, fragile, patient, persistent hope, that somewhere in this chain of events, in these lives that have continued in the shadow of all this grief and all these unanswered questions, the truth will finally emerge. That someone will decide the time has come to speak. That hope has never gone away. It has just had to survive a very long time without being rewarded. Let me lay out what we know, what we don't know, and what needs to happen. Clearly, without embellishment. What we know. Amy Fitzpatrick was 15 years old when she was last seen on the 1st of January, 2008, on the Costa del Sol in southern Spain. What we know. Before she disappeared, a formal written warning was submitted to the Irish Embassy in Madrid, naming a specific individual as a threat to her safety, and stating that she was, quote, liable to disappear. What we know. Amy's Irish phone was found in her bedroom at home after she went missing, suggesting she may have returned home that night. What we know. Her phone and laptop, held as evidence by her lawyer, were the only items taken in a burglary of his office. Everything else was left untouched. What we know. In 2013, Amy's brother Dean was stabbed and killed by David Mahone, who was convicted of manslaughter and served 7 years. What we know. David Mahone subsequently married Amy's mother, Audrey Fitzpatrick. What we do not know. What happened to Amy between the moment she left Ashley Rose's home and the moment her phone appeared in her bedroom? What we do not know. Where Amy is. What we do not know. Whether the full truth of this case will ever be told. What needs to happen is clear. A full, transparent, jointly conducted investigation by Irish and Spanish authorities into Amy's disappearance. A formal acknowledgement of the institutional failures that preceded it. And justice. Real, meaningful, proportionate justice for Amy Fitzpatrick and for Dean. Amy's father has never given up. The people who loved her have never given up. And as long as this story is told, as long as her name is said out loud, there remains the possibility, however distant, that someone who knows something will finally choose to come forward. If you have any information relating to the disappearance of Amy Fitzpatrick, please contact An Garda Síochána in Ireland or the relevant Spanish authorities. Links are in the description below. Amy's case remains open and active. Amy Fitzpatrick packed her suitcase. She wanted to go home. She never got there. Her name is Amy Fitzpatrick. She was 15 years old. She was Irish. She was someone's daughter. She was someone's sister. She laughed and she worried and she wrote in a diary and she kept a phone full of the numbers of people she loved. And she deserves better than to be forgotten. Say her name. If this story reached you, if Amy stayed with you, please share this video. Not for the numbers, for Amy. Because the most powerful thing any of us can do for a case like this is make sure more people know her name. Share it. Talk about it. Tell someone who has never heard this story. If you're new here, please subscribe. We cover cases that deserve more attention than the world gave them, and we always try to do it with the honesty and the care that the people involved deserve. Links for reporting information, as well as sources used in this video, are in the description below. Justice for Amy. Justice for Dean. Thank you for watching.